For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
All right, we have a quorum, and I'm calling the Metro Council Business Meeting for July 11th, 2023 to order. I will now ask our clerk, Connor, to call the roll.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Nolan.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Present.
And President Peterson.
Present, thank you. Before we begin our agenda items for today, can we please play the safety video for in-person attendees?
I'm Micah Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. For those tuning in, I would like to highlight a change from the original agenda as we move through. We have moved resolution number 23-5345 regarding MTIP amendments off of our consent agenda, and we will hold public comment on that agenda item following the staff presentation. That we will move on to public communication, and I will now open public communications on non-agenda items. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting on non-agenda items?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. As a reminder, we'll be taking public testimony on agenda items a little bit later in the meeting. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we'll manage a timer to go off of the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us in person, you can fill out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bring that up to me. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can hit the raise hand button. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand button is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. For those joining on Zoom today, I'll promote you to a full panelist when it's your turn to testify. So I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you accept it, you'll rejoin as a panelist where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And as a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, I will look for any hands up again for non-agenda items. I don't see any hands in the room or on Zoom, counselors, and we have not had anybody sign up in advance to testify. There was a little bit of written testimony that was distributed to you all yesterday, though. With that, I still don't see any hands going up, President Peterson.
All right. Seeing no one coming forward and no one online, I will close the public communication portion of the meeting on non-agenda items. And we will move on to resolution number 23-5345 for the purpose of adding 3 new projects and canceling 1 project to the 2021 through 24 MTIP, enabling required federal approval actions to move forward. Today, I believe we have Tom Kloster, not Ted, or do we have Ted online?
Ted is online.
Oh, okay. planning manager, and also in backup, Tom Kloster and Catherine Charlo, here to present the staff portion of this resolution.
Good morning, Council President Peterson and members of the Metro Council. I am, as President Peterson mentioned, Ted Liebold, Planning Manager in the Planning Development and Research Department. I'm just going to give a very brief overview of the amendments before you today. It is our bundle of amendments to the 2021 through 2024 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Is adding 3 projects to the I'll call it the MTIP, and deleting 1 project. 2 of the projects were congressional grants to transit projects. We have 1 project that is I think the subject of a public comment we received, which is a federal discretionary grant that was received by the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project for $1 million. And then there's a cancellation of a project. As I mentioned, we did receive 1 public comment on the federal discretionary grant to the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. That grant was for $1 million to be matched by the project with $1 million of local funds. And it is to do a planning level study to investigate the seismic stability of the soils in the particularly in the Hayden Island area, to make sure that as the bridge is designed and engineered, that they are adequately addressing any seismic stability issues for that project. The Interstate Bridge Replacement Project is already programmed for preliminary engineering in the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. So this is adding additional funding to the project that is already in there, but it is because it was a federal discretionary planning study that was awarded, we have programmed it as a planning phase in the MTIP itself, so that there's clarity when the project goes to get reimbursement for these funds, that they have a clear line of sight between the programming in the MTIP and the grant award itself. So that is what's before you today. We did receive 1 comment, a written comment in opposition from Martin, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, Slapikas, from the High Noon Neighborhood Association, generally in opposition to the project, and describing the potential impacts of the project to their neighborhood. So we also have, I have project staff here today if there's any in-depth questions about the scope of the actual work that's to be completed with these funds. But otherwise, I'll turn it back over to you for any questions or considerations you have.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions for Ted on the project or the proposed amendments? Ted, for clarity, could we just go over the 2 transit projects?
Oh, sure. So these are what are called congressionally directed spending. You used to refer to them as earmarks. And those are, I know one of them is for a work, I think it's $5 million was the award for work on reconfiguring and updating the Beaverton Transit Center to have better facilities for people alighting and disembarking from the buses there at the Beaverton Transit Center, and for an improvement in the efficiency of the bus operations at the transit center itself. And then the second one is to the Beaverton School District, so that they can start beginning electric vehicle charging for their school buses. And this was actually, an award from the statewide CMAQ, which Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds that were distributed at the statewide level by the Department of Environmental Quality, which ran a competitive discretionary grant program that the Beaverton School District applied for and was awarded funds.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. If there are no questions then for staff, we'll move on to public comment on resolution number 23-5345. I'll open that public comment. Oh, I apologize, Counselor. Can we just come back to you after we do public comment?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on resolution number 23-5345, now is the time to do so. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and again, I'll manage the timer to go off at that 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us in person, you can fill out one of the blue cards in the back of the room. If you're joining on Zoom, you can sign up now by hitting the raise hand button, which is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. Again, for those joining on Zoom, I'll be promoting you to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up, and you'll have to accept that promotion before you'll be able to rejoin and turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And once again, nobody testifying today has to give their physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, counselors, I will wait for another couple of seconds for any hands to go up. I don't see any in the room, and I'll give folks on Zoom another couple of seconds here. And no hands going up there either, President Peterson.
Okay. We'll just wait a second, because we did have a request from the public to take this off the consent agenda. Anything?
No, and I
Okay.
don't see any. No.
All right, with that, seeing no more comments, I will close the public comment on this portion of the meeting on resolution number 23-5345 and go back to Counselor Rosenthal. Did you have any other questions for staff?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just I had a quick question on the seismic, the grant addition for the seismic work. Seismic work was largely completed 10 years ago when we did the first MRC. Is this supplemental updating, or in what way is it different from the work that was previously completed?
Okay, that's a good question. It's probably better answered by the ODOT staff, who I believe are here. If we can promote Shilpa Malim from ODOT. She's probably better qualified to answer that question, Counselor, than me.
Shilpa is up now.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. President Peterson and members of the Metro Council. Yes, this is a supplemental to what was done under CRC. So CRC, the study was done. There's a test shaft program to verify the constructability of diameter shafts in there. And as a result of it, they also recommended doing a ground stabilization when we go into construction. And that is what this test is going to do, is figure out how we can stabilize the ground during construction and minimize the risk as we get into construction. So we don't take that risk into construction and save time, schedule, and money when we get there.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. If that's the last of the counselor questions, then I will call for a motion on resolution number 23-5345.
So moved.
I will.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I think Counselor Rosenthal beat you. It was been moved by Counselor Lewis and seconded by Counselor Rosenthal. Any further discussion? Just checking the screen. No. All right. With that, Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Wong.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Aye.
Counselor Simpson.
Aye.
Counselor Nolan.
Yes.
And President Peterson.
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to a presentation by the Climate Justice Task Force Budget Note Presentation. Over the past several years, the council has discussed how climate justice fits into our work here at Metro. And I believe we were first part of, oh, crap. We were part of the conversation back in 2019, which was led by Counselor Gonzalez, to have a budget note that required that also Councilor Wong worked on then, which directed the Chief Operating Officer to create a framework that would envision, develop, implement, and coordinate a regional climate justice and resilience strategy. Today, I'll kick it off over to our COO, Marisa Madrigal.
Thank you, President Peterson. Good morning, councilors. It's wonderful to be here today to introduce council to the first look at the results of the Climate Justice Task Force. As President Peterson said, this is the product of advocacy by Councilor Gonzalez, beginning back in 2019, and more recently by Councilor Wong. As the executive sponsor of the task force, I've been able to enjoy a front row seat to the amazing work that our staff across the agency are doing and planning to do to combat climate change and climate injustice. In 2021, in the wake of the pandemic and at the behest of council, Metro took a stance on the climate crisis. As an agency, we committed to using a racial equity lens to tackle climate change, to reduce the impacts of the climate crisis on frontline communities, and to implement climate solutions that foster resilience, health, and equity. Today, after months of work, I'm excited to hear directly from the staff who made this work possible as they discuss potential outcomes for Metro and the region as a whole. These staff-driven outcomes are envisioned as a piece of our commitment to agency-wide strategic targets. The desired outcomes from both the Climate Justice Task Force and the Strategic Targets process can inform how we begin to craft a plan to achieve climate justice in the greater Portland region. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Victor Sin, Michael Tete, and Elliot Rose for our presentation.
Thank you so much, Marisa, for that awesome opener. It really does set the tone for months of work that the task force has done to stand up a proposal for you today. So Jamisha, second slide, please. So for the record, my name is Victor Sin, Policy Advisor in the Council Office, and I'm here with Michael Tete, Parks and Nature Community Engagement Program Manager and Task Force Co-Chair, along with myself, as well as my colleague, Elliot Rose, Senior Transportation Planner. So we're excited to share with you an update on Council's direction to propose a framework and work plan to stand up a regional strategy on climate justice and resilience. Slide 3, please. So Michael will cover aspects of the framework in detail in later slides, but one of the bodies of work the task force focused on is ensuring we're all speaking and understanding the same definitions as we work towards a regional strategy. We're inspired by this definition of climate justice, but know these definitions will evolve over time as we conduct additional stakeholder engagement. We're also guided by Metro's racial equity strategy, which is integrated in everything that we do. This graphic right here kind of captures what integrating climate strategies under the umbrella of a racial equity strategy could look like. Next slide. So Michael and I had the privilege of chairing the task force, a cross-departmental team made up of superstars from across the agency, convened by Marisa to inventory our existing work and opportunities, outline a framework and vision for the future, and identify immediate next steps for the refinement and implementation. You'll see here everyone's lovely smiles from one of the virtual meetings that we had. There unfortunately is one of Erin Keehee over there looking sideways, but I promise you she was looking at us and smiling as well. So as Marisa said, we're working towards a strategy everyone at Metro and all of our partners and community can get behind and see themselves in. And we're still early enough in the process that we will ensure more voices are at the table and we continue this work. Next slide, please. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank all of the task force members for engaging, thinking bold and big, and being so committed to this work. I see two of our task force members are here today, Sabrina and Annalise in the corner over there. And I also want to thank our planning team, some of us sitting behind me today, Dana, Sarah, Jenna from CAM, and Ann, advisor to Councilor Huang, for helping cultivate a space for the task force to share and imagine without barriers. Next slide. So we really can see ourselves in this work because it's clear that Metro and our partners are already committed to tackling climate change and addressing inequities as captured in all of the many programs and projects Metro takes on. The breadth of experience and perspectives from the task force was critical to capturing common themes and takeaways, whether it's Kim Ellis providing an RTP and climate smart lens, or Shervin Hess at the zoo speaking on conservation efforts. It really did feel like a Captain Planet moment for folks in the 90s that love Captain Planet, where our forces literally combined. Next slide, please. So the task force met each month between November and May with structured themes to work through, including taking stock of the work Metro already does, visioning what we can do beyond what we already do, discussing what resources and capacity is needed to carry this work forward, and defining what internal structure can help us better coordinate. We use Miro board as one of our primary facilitation tools. So this screenshot right here, which you could barely read, is taken from one of our in-person visioning workshops. Although it's hard to see, task force members noted what Metro could start, stop, and continue, and imagine as part of current and future climate justice work. This exercise helped reveal areas of overlap, challenge, and programs in need of more collaboration, resourcing, and support. Elliot and myself, some others on the task force, also serve on the Council Strategic Targets Tiger teams specific to the environment. Recently, we went through a similar exercise as this visioning exercise, and again, it revealed similar outcomes, so it's nice that there's synergy there. Next slide. So at the same workshop, we heard from our community partners at Verde and Coalitions of Communities of Color about what is already happening in the region on climate, how Metro can plug into existing resources and experts, and how to help consciously shift power to community voices, particularly those most impacted. They emphasized the need to move at a speed of trust, which I love that statement, and encourage Metro to tap the expertise of organizations already leading on climate justice work in our communities. Coalitions Communities of Color emphasized the importance of creating continuous feedback loops, the need for consistency across regional climate plans, and not forcing community members to repeat themselves over and over again when engaging with local government. We were also fortunate to have Councillor Simpson and Councillor Huang in attendance to share their aspirations in this effort and really humanizing the impact that communities across the region are experiencing. Next slide. So after being inspired by our guest speakers at the workshop, the task force worked in small groups to explore existing data and consider big ideas within the strategy areas of climate mitigation, climate resilience, carbon sequestration, and climate justice. So to name a few of those big ideas, one of them was any future regional investment funded project or initiative should be net zero or hazard resilient, focusing on green workforce development for BIPOC and marginalized communities. So the theme of shared prosperity and workforce equity was pretty strong. Equitable access to natural areas, low-cost energy-efficient housing, and of course, safe, accessible, and efficient transit across the region. Next slide. So, as we reflected on these last few months, we recognized that many of our team members have worked on similar efforts in the past, which for many reasons at the time never moved forward. But we're at a moment of opportunity here. We know the issue of climate change and social justice is of great urgency to all of us. And what makes this effort feel different is there is clear support from our leadership, thank you, Marisa, support from council with Councilors Gonzalez and Huang leading the way, and task force members from across the agency feeling a strong sense of collaboration and eagerness to see this work through. There are also clear connections between the Council Targets Project, and we have an exciting opportunity before us to really put our internal and external collaboration to work. Metro will be a recipient of the EPA Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant and will facilitate this work on behalf of the region. Elliot Rose has been shepherding this effort so far and will provide an overview and how we can leverage it towards a greater regional strategy. So with that, Elliot, take it away. Next slide, Jamisha.
Great, thank you, Victor. For the record, Elliot Rose, Senior Transportation Planner. So Victor showed that wonderful slide a moment ago that listed all the climate work going on in different departments at Metro. The climate pollution reduction grant was one of the things that was listed under planning, development, and research. But we wanted to share some information about it with you today and go into a little detail because it's new. The program was just announced in the spring. It's a really significant opportunity to advance climate work in the region. This is a planning grant that resources us to identify the region's best climate projects and line them up for billions of dollars in implementation funding that EPA and other federal agencies plan to make available over the next several years. And also, the way that this grant came together really demonstrates both the value and the continued need for coordination around climate work that Victor and Michael are highlighting, and the rest of the members of the Climate Justice Task Force are interested in highlighting for you today. So this is a $1 million planning grant to identify projects that meet the 3 criteria listed on this slide: reducing greenhouse gas emissions, ready for implementation, advancing equity and workforce development. And any strategy that's prioritized in the planning grant is eligible for competitive implementation grants that EPA plans to make available. And EPA has estimated that around $25 billion in implementation funding are going to be available through various programs. So it's really exciting, but the timeline for the grant is really tight. The requirements are really ambitious. And this is an unusual process, the way this came together, because it wasn't competitive for this planning grant. We just had to get the agencies in the region to agree who should lead it. And it's because of the type of work that Victor described that I think we were really well positioned to have Metro stand up and say, and be recognized as the agency to lead this in the region. You know, we've done so much work coordinating on climate and clarifying our mission, both internally and externally with our partners. And that resulted in, you know, really short order. The application for this grant came together in a matter of months, and you can see the diversity of partner agencies that provided letters of support over that time, because we just, you know, Metro had done such a great job establishing its climate leadership in the region. And at the same time, there's still a lot of work to do in delivering this grant. The first major deliverable is due next spring, and we have to do a comprehensive update to a regional climate strategy within 2 years. So it's going to continue to require us to step up our leadership on climate to deliver this in a way that best benefits the region. Next slide, please. As we've been putting this grant together, it's given me a lot of chance to coordinate with Victor and Michael and talk about, and all the other members of Climate Justice Task Force, and talk about the different areas of climate that we're touching on. Always a risk to try to describe and summarize Metro's diverse business and the way that we coordinate, but I'm going to try here. This diagram shows the 4 different forces that we see driving Metro's climate work. We have our mission and council direction. We have our internal goals for reducing emissions through operation, and we also have to support our partners and respond to state and federal policies. And a lot of the work that Victor spoke to so far has been kind of focused on that yellow and purple bubble in the upper right, and a lot of the work that we do in planning and development and research is focused on the more external facing work in the green and blue bubbles. Next slide, please. And what I've really learned as I've been kind of working to understand the many different ways that Metro has approached climate is that fulfilling our climate mission means coordinating between these different poles that drive our climate work to help the region move forward. And over the past decade, there's been a lot of that happening, and Metro's engaged in several different efforts that sit at the intersection of these different bubbles. I'm not going to describe them all. I did want to highlight that the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant is an important one because it's a new opportunity that can fund both internal strategies at Metro and community-facing greenhouse gas reduction strategies in the region. So it's a great bridge between the internal parts of Metro's climate work and the external facing parts. In spite of all this great coordination that's happening around the ring of this donut, it still feels like there's a bit of a void in the middle here because there's no single person or work program that holds down and coordinates across all of these different efforts. And so filling this void is part of building climate leadership in the region. And we think that's part of the promise that we're building toward with the work that Victor and Michael are describing. Next slide. Turn it back over to Michael.
Thank you, Elliot.
I'm Michael Tete. I'm the Community Services Program Director for Metro's Parks and Nature Department. And we drew inspiration from the process used to develop Metro's strategic plan to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And our task force channeled a wide range of regional expectations and centered the perspectives of historically marginalized communities to develop a solid foundation for our strategic framework. Soon after convening our task force, we knew we needed to embrace the complexity of our shared regional climate challenge. We ensured that these fundamentals would work in concert at the regional, agency, department, and programmatic levels. This would allow us to begin to create strategically aligned systems, tools, and evaluative measures to meet the diverse needs of critical stakeholders inside and outside of our agency. Next slide, please. We imagine a region that will have managed the impacts of climate change with a focus on justice, collaboration, and equity, and will have created new opportunities and stability for those who bear the greatest burdens of climate change. Since its founding, our Metro Council has made clear the unique role and responsibility we all have in making this region a great place, one with clean water, clean air, with abundant nature for generations to come. Next slide. In keeping with agency policy and council direction, we recognize the disproportionate impact on Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, people living on lower incomes, and we are committed to prioritize equitable outcomes. Accordingly, our approach has been sure to center community capacity as a focus for investment. Our process has focused on growing a shared understanding of the intersections of equity and climate. And as we set our sight on measurable climate goals, we've been sure to evaluate our outcome measures to ensure that each action we take will move us all closer towards our climate goals. Next slide. I'm pleased to report that your Climate Justice Task Force was able to successfully achieve the goals it was charged with you by May of this year. And we are pleased to be here today to share those outcomes with you. You can see those outcomes listed in Phase 1. Today provides a unique and important opportunity for you all to be involved in this process of informing and directing the work as we move to Phase 2. With council direction, staff are prepared to continue advancing the work with 3 priorities that emerged as strategic imperatives as a result of our work as a task force. First, we plan to continue working in partnership with our DEI department to further develop our climate equity framework. Second, staff will continue to scope the proposed staffing investment that will be required to advance our climate justice and resiliency strategy. And third, we plan to continue our close coordination with the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that you heard about from Elliot earlier. You can expect that staff will be able to maintain the momentum and enthusiasm that we've generated around this work, and that we'll be back in the fall with an update on progress, and you will be presented with an opportunity to invest the staff resources that will be necessary to achieve our goals. Next slide. And that brings us to how you can help today. We want to hear from each of you, and we provided some prompts to help support that discussion. As you know, climate justice work is challenging and complex, and we all have a really important role to play. Just wanted to take the moment to thank you all for all that you do to help make our region a great place. And with that, I'll just wrap up. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I'll turn it over to Councilor Gonzalez.
Sweet, thank you. Thank you.
With no like heads up.
Yeah, a lot of energy here for sure. And we do want to share the initial kind of comment period with Councilor Huang, who we've worked on this together for the last few months, meeting regularly with the project team, and I'm feeling really excited, really energized about this work. Since I joined the council, I've really appreciated the ability to learn about all of the work that Metro does across all of its departments to advance climate. And with a lot of the federal resources that are coming online, have come online, there's just this really wonderful nexus point where, like that slide showed, all of these cross-functional departments working together. And I think what this process has done really well is create some consistent language, really helping us understand, setting the baseline. Incredibly impressed with the 13 letters of support, that jurisdictional regional partnership approach. is really, really promising. The Venn diagram, like I just drew that on my own thing. I'm gonna like steal that and use it as much as I can. But I do gotta say, when I proposed a similar budget note to this in fiscal year 1920, to help organize the work and to help, invest in the work that, Jenna had worked on, and some other folks at Metro at the time, Sasha Pollack, and work that was happening at the agency, really felt like, there's a time in this generation to get this work going forward. And that work got us to a point that was good, and you've carried that work into an actionable item. I'm really, really eager to help us think really broadly about what these three kind of pillars are in terms of carbon sequestration, mitigation, and resilience in unison with each other, helping us to develop outcomes and metrics, which is something that this council has been really focused on, especially as we create special council initiatives with this work. I mean, just to kind of wrap it up, I think the work so far, I mean, when we kind of drafted this budget note to help this work go forward, I think honestly you have surpassed my expectations for what was even possible. I really thank Marisa as well for being an executive sponsor for this work, for Michael and Victor for your, I know there's been a lot of meetings, and for all the departments as well for identifying this as a priority and for really giving a lot of staff time to work on this. I feel, like I said, I feel really excited with this regional strategy. Elliot, thank you for taking on yet another big project with this grant and really trying to identify Metro's commitments. And once this grant lands here, really how we're going to implement it and make sure that the work hits. I think at the end of the day, we want to advance climate justice and resiliency. We have to make sure that it helps the communities that are on the front lines. And there's a lot of appetite and energy in this region for this work. And again, just aligning with this incredible EPA opportunity to not only have policy and ideas and recommendations and guidance, but to really pair that with funding. I mean, I feel like Metro's been waiting for this for a really long time. And I feel lucky to be on the council when this time is now. So Councilor, do you want to share anything?
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, I want to start with appreciations, echoing Councilor Gonzalez for all the work that's gone into this important project. I've been doing a lot of community engagement with our staff on 82nd Avenue the last couple of weeks, and we'll walk. It's been summer, so we'll walk around, and it's blazing hot most days. And if you step off 82nd onto a nearby park, it's like 20 degrees cooler. And that is kind of the experience that, folks are facing on the ground and why this work is so important. And, I think we just need to be sure that we're lifting up the community voice like our partners at CCC and Verde said. And I'm also just really excited for this model of work at Metro, how cross-departmental and cross-programmatic it is. I think it could be a real kind of shining example of how we tackle big issues in this agency in the future. And it really does feel like, Victor, you were saying, a Captain Planet moment, and that's really what we need. So yep, thank you for bringing all these folks together and having these important conversations over the last couple of years. So yeah, I'm just really excited to co-sponsor it, and I want to thank Councilor Gonzalez for kicking this off a couple of years ago. It's been a long time coming, and I'm just super excited for the support from the EPA and our community partners as well. Gosh, I could not think of better timing for that. So it feels like all the stars aligned. All the agency departments came together. The EPA and the Biden administration stepped up. So I'm just really excited about where we're headed with this, and really looking forward to celebrate this as a milestone. Thank you.
Great. Councilors, thank you for kicking that off, and thank you to staff. Any other comments? Councilor Simpson.
Absolutely. Again, I want to start off with big thank yous to Councilor Gonzalez, Councilor Wong for sponsoring, as well as the steadfast leadership of COO Madrigal. She directed staff. Elliot has always been in my high praise since before the council. Same with Michael. And Victor, my hat goes off to you as well for roping me into this process. I'm so thankful to see this happening. I'm glad to hear that we are working as an agency to like really clean ourselves up and also think about the region. It really makes me think about kind of the work that, and I'll speak across government agencies, Commissioner Fish was embarking on, particularly with electrifying, city equipment around leaf blowers and weed eaters and things like that. And I would love for us to continue to think about that too as we modernize and electrify our fleets, but to think about how we as Metro operate and move around the region so that we can be that shining example. And also with climate having major impacts on other areas across the nation, I do see us as a destination for new residents to come in because they see the work that we're doing as an agency. And my hat goes off to staff because they continue to guide that with our leadership. So again, more of a comment, I'm super happy to serve with colleagues who are forward thinking. And yes, I got the Captain Planet t-shirt in my closet too. So I'm really, really excited about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nolan, then Lewis.
Thank you, Madam President. Thanks for bringing this to us. I appreciated the materials you sent in advance, and the presentation here just augmented that. I applaud Metro grabbing onto its role as a convener within the region to bring together the efforts and perspectives and input from affected communities, leaders in communities of color, as well as our partner agencies around the region. We have had ambitious climate goals in the past, and in fact, they remain on our books. And we have sometimes erred by counting on others to achieve the goals we set out to. The most immediately available example of that is our strategy and aim to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from transportation that relied on the electrification of the entire fleet, something not directly in our control. And we are here today not having achieved that target on the schedule that we had hoped to. So I'm interested in how this task force and this effort will rely on our own efforts or things that we and the partner signatories to this effort can actually control. Because if we rely on someone else and not on our own actual authority, programs, or influence, I'm afraid we'll end up at the same unsuccessful outcome, and I want this program to succeed.
No, I appreciate that, Councilor Nolan. I think when we, as a task force, were first looking at this work, it really is branching off of the efforts that have happened in the past. Mm-hmm. And so we have such a great foundation. And every time those efforts were taking place, partner collaboration, communication was happening. I think what makes this effort feel different is we have, I guess, so to speak, a carrot on a stick to guide our partners with this grant opportunity, and to really lead as a region and showcase a few examples. Elliot, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on what some real tangible opportunities Metro has with facilitating this grant could mean for actually implementing real programs and projects across the region.
If I might, Madam President, before Elliot augments that, this planning grant will be very helpful to convene this. The real carrot out there, though, is the infrastructure grant that will follow, because $25 billion to be available nationally, Portland metro area should be able to get more than its fair share because we're above average. And I'm interested in how we might convene a conversation about how to deploy those funds to make serious impact on climate deterioration.
I think it's a really good point. I mean, I think there's a real opportunity through this grant because we have to quantify the impact of the different actions that we're proposing for implementation funding. And so this is, all the projects that are going to be included in this plan and eligible for the subsequent funding have to go through the same screen of how many emissions are they going to reduce, are agencies ready to implement them, and do they have co-benefits for equity and workforce development?
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, I want to start by thanking all the staff that's been part of this working group. Quite the impressive roster of folks who managed to find time on top of everything else they were doing. Really important work. Obviously, leadership from fellow council helps in our council office, but to see such senior level folks surely supported by those unnamed, want to extend thanks to them as well. I think that we are a fairly unsiloed and flat structure, and yet there have been several times in the past year where I have seen multiple of our regional investments happen in such close proximity that they should be multiplying or echoing off each other, and yet they still are not raised to the awareness of folks across departments, specifically with our investments that we've made with the support of our voters in parks, in housing, and in other places where we have specific program where we are putting forward Metro's values, not just planning in conjunction with our jurisdiction. So I see this really as a space where we should be amplifying any dollar that we're spending at the regional level. It's not just additive, it's multiplicative. So I look forward to continuing to work across disciplines. I saw Courtney there on WPEZ's front. I honestly feel like there's a lot of opportunity in WPEZ, particularly on the workforce side. We have a long way to go scoping out how many impacts we can make with some tweaks there. So absolutely right direction. To the question of, the communities I represent being seen and heard, my district's really big. I mean, all of our districts are big. I think I might have the widest disparity between local jurisdictions who are true climate leaders and are really carrying the flag and those who have nothing. A lot of my constituents live in unincorporated Clackamas County where they can't even point right now to a county climate action plan. So there's definitely at least 15 years of work that those residents are behind by. I wish I could see them better benefiting from this. I'm curious what outreach was made to cities, jurisdictions down in District 2 as part of the sign-on letter, and hope it's not too late to figure out if we can adjust that grant so that we are seeing benefit to folks who are frankly on climate being truly left behind by their elected leadership.
Yeah, it's a great question, Councilor Lewis. We held open-ended listening sessions just to start the grant, which is, I won't say we got everybody in the region with that, but I think we had around 40 agencies attending the 2 listening sessions we held. We did get feedback and sign on from smaller communities as well as larger ones, and we've continued to hear through this a lot of what you're voicing and the way that, one of the neat things about receiving a grant from the federal agency is it gives you a chance to advocate to that agency as well. And I've been hearing from smaller government agencies that don't have the capacity that implementing stuff can't just mean putting projects in the ground. there has to be a recognition that there needs to be capacity building, policy changes, and often kind of downstream planning before you get to a brick and mortar project. And so, I mean, this is a long process. There's plenty of room for folks to get involved. We're in the process of developing the agreement with EPA. So there's plenty of room for folks to get involved, and I think, we're already starting to advocate with EPA for the follow-up dollars to recognize that implementation means building capacity as well as actually putting projects in the ground.
Yeah, absolutely, thank you. And I appreciate that there's a definite art to showing the laggers to the EPA. One, it's a reason to invest, but two, it's exposing a little bit of a vulnerability. But in this case, I think it's worth it if we have the opportunity to really bring the region forward, including those who have been left behind. The opportunity also exists, I think, for us to share this work out at more tables. And I would hope that through leadership and a council office, we would consider doing a visit with C4, WCCC, MPAC, JPAC. This feels like that level of potential. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Councilor Lewis, to speak on your previous point about and opportunities for cross-departmental echoing of similar efforts, like this whole process was a perfect example of that, because as we were moving through month by month, members of the task force were plugged into all of these other efforts, including the CPRG, that was like, oh my gosh, this is on our lap. Let's work through this, and let's find ways to really cultivate this. And I kind of harken back to Councilor Gonzalez's one of his original intents was getting our own house in order in terms of how we coordinate cross-departmentally between colleagues. And another thing that landed on our lap, of course, is the council strategic targets process and effort. And so there's all of these significant moving pieces, and we're working hard to smudge them all together to have it be one. So,
Thanks. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, like everybody else, I want to say kudos to staff, particularly Ted and Elliot and to Victor for their work on this, and also the Chief Operating Officer at Madrigal. And particularly, I want to give a lot of credit to Councilors Gonzalez and Huang for their leadership on this. I think it's great. I think we're moving forward. I do have a couple comments. First, on a historical perspective, one of the things that the Pakistan floods this last year brought to mind the fact that one of the big climate injustices that has always happened is that people who are disadvantaged tend to live in floodplains. Now, this is something that we have, in some sense, solved, because we don't let people develop in floodplains anymore. I mean, of course, the Vanport was a particular example, but we haven't really developed the idea of where should the lower income people or people with disadvantages be living if they're not living in the floodplain. So that's a gap. I would suggest probably that one of the biggest climate justice gaps is trees. And I think we all know this, that we don't have enough trees in areas that should have more trees, and it produces global heating. So I'm looking forward to seeing what particular specific regionally climate justice gaps we get in this. I think it's a good process moving forward. Probably my biggest question to staff would be, going forward, as you know, we have, at least, and I appreciate Councilor Lewis's comments about her wide range of acceptability of climate smart strategies. I have a little less of a diversity in my district of 7 cities, and they all seem to adopt the concept quite easily with slightly different variations. To what extent going forward will we be able to maintain a strong level of coordination so that they see this as something that they can easily adopt, readily adapt to their particular needs in each of the, because each city has a specific, location, specific concerns, et cetera, et cetera. So how is that something that's going to be a priority moving forward?
Yeah, thank you for those questions, Councilor Rosenthal. To speak first on your 2 ideas on tree canopies and floodplains, those were actually themes that were called out during our workshop of thinking big and bold, of start, stop, and move forward on. And so, yeah, we're all thinking along the same lines. In terms of partner engagement and coordination, that's very much a part of the continued refinement work. If we were to come up with a true regional strategy that, again, we want everybody to be able to see themselves in. And so, that's, for us, our next phase is really scoping out like resourcing capacity. What does it take for Metro to really take charge and go out there and do that engagement work with our partners? And so that certainly is a priority for us.
Great. Before we go on to Councilor Huang, I would like to weigh in. I think it's great work. I'm really appreciative of getting our house in order first and understanding that. I want to echo Councilor Lewis's comments. I'm going to try and put this into a pro. I would hope that as we go through this process, Metro sees itself as being able to propose things on behalf of the region and not just be reactive to taking in projects that others see, but things that we see gaps in as well. I would encourage this on the transportation side when it comes to the MTIP in future, right? And how do we propose things as well as how do we propose things for the EPA? We are not right now in a proactive mode. We are not in a reactive, but we are taking in from others, but we are not, right? We need to take that next step out of the work that you're doing now and say, but what does the region need? And when I go back to Councilor Lewis's comments, the thing that we had to deal the most with in Clackamas County is slides and a lack of connectivity because you have to close roads because there's no money to reopen them once a slide occurs, or if the slope is starting to go and you can't buck it up, right? So there's a lot of issues around that. And if you want to get real specific, Newell Creek Canyon, affordable housing was built in the 90s and it's now closed because of slope instability. So these things are real and we can't just depend on talking to a smaller group within the 5 miles of Metro headquarters. We do need a bigger, broader conversation and the input in order to see from a different perspective what those other issues are. So trees in one area may be slope stability in another area, which might also be wildfire in another area. So I would just want to make sure that we are doing a complete blanket of input so that when we are getting our house in order, we are looking at it from all these different perspectives and not from again, a very in Portland type of conversation because there's so much else going on. And I'm pretty sure that there's Washington County examples that could be given as well. But that's what came to my mind immediately is that we cannot afford to lose low-income housing, but it was cheap land, and I wonder why. And there's severe debate at the time of whether it should have been built there, and eventually it was closed. So that's the first thing is I'd like to see us become proactive of what does a regional ask look like in these different areas rather than just trying to say, oh, we have to wait until this county or this city makes a proposal. We could work with them to create a proposal. It goes for the parks too when it comes to the community, large scale, blah, blah, blah program. I can never remember what we named it, Michael. The large scale
community visions.
Yeah.
Thank you. It seems to change too quickly for me to keep up. But, again, going out and working with those programs, you could see something like this actually fit into that type of program and make it a proactive, go out and talk to that community. So that's just my first request. And then I think as we move forward in this, I'm just going to be a broken record on our community engagement. As we start to focus outside, we have minimum standards we need to meet in terms of engaging. And that minimum standard is talking to basically a blanket of the region so that everybody knows what we're doing. Because we haven't necessarily set that standard. And so we need to like figure out no matter what, and this could help us, right? Because you're cross-cutting. How do we meet that minimum threshold so everybody understands what's going on and everybody has a chance to engage and everybody has a chance to hear other people's perspectives, which is what isn't necessarily happening now because we've segmented people out. And so we're not encouraging the learning to happen. And I'm hoping that that is something that you can work on through this. We always need to have an emphasis on engagement to those who don't have as good of access or that capacity building. That emphasis needs to keep going. But we need to set these minimum thresholds. So as you move forward, I would just hope that we discuss that before you move forward and then figure out what our emphasis is going to be on. How do we go to that next step to make sure everybody's engaged? But that minimum is going to be really important. So that's all I have. Any other comments? Any other oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Wong, that's right.
Great, thank you, Madam President. Gosh, again, I'm just so excited about the opportunity with the EPA, and I was wondering if you might be, and it might be too early, but kind of forecast, how that might play out and what the deliverables of the planning grant are. Is it kind of like a regional climate action plan, or I guess what is it that you're envisioning? And I assume we're probably co-created with regional partners. What are the specifics to make this region eligible and competitive for larger investment?
Happy to take a quick pass at this and follow up with you because you're asking some really great questions about a detailed grant, Councilor Wong. There are two main deliverables that are required for the EPA grant in the short term. There's the one next spring, which is called the preliminary climate, and they're both climate action plans for the region. The first one is short turnaround because EPA is trying to do a quick round of $5 billion in implementation funding, so this is time for that. And the spring grant will be, because the timeline is so quick, that's kind of going to be a meta plan of the existing climate action plans in the region where we look around and we work with a consultant to figure out, hey, not everyone has a climate action plan. Like, what from this plan is relevant to that community? And how do we get to apples view of what strategies are going to be most effective given the different methods that have gone into these plans? So we get to learn a lot about the state of planning in the region through that and kind of start to coordinate it. And then we have the second plan that's due in summer of 2025 that actually gives us a little bit more time to step back and crunch the numbers and take a broader look based on what we learned from that initial review. And that has different pots of implementation funding attached to it. So that's, that's a peek at the process, and happy to follow up with more details if you have further questions on it.
And then if I'm drawing an analogy, is it similar to how we think about kind of the RTP process where we look at projects from across the region and then we have a process to kind of prioritize specific investments? Would that be fair?
I think that's fair to say, and I think it's going to be, it's going to be maybe more narrowly focused than the RTP because you see on the slide, there's just three criteria, and we need to focus on those three. So, there's going to be pressure for everyone to get their actions in there, but at the end of the day, we also have to make sure that our plan looks credible and that we're really evaluating projects clearly in a way that's in line with EPA's requirements to be successful in bringing funding to those projects. And I think that's a dance we enjoy doing in planning and development, and it's something that we work on a lot through different funding sources in the region, helping to meet the requirements in a way that best benefits our partners and us.
Thank you, and I really appreciate President Peterson's comments about prioritizing, regional priorities and being proactive. So thank you for raising that, and hopefully we can incorporate that into the planning process going forward. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Counselor Rosenthal and Nolan, do we have the ability to get back to you, or are they quick questions?
Mine is a quick comment.
Okay, all right.
It's more of a quick comment. And
Go
it's
ahead.
Based upon, thank you, President Peterson. It's a quick comment, partly based upon your comments on being proactive and also your comments on Newell Creek. This whole grant process has two particular components. One is resiliency and one is climate justice. And as you point out, resiliency is different in different parts of the region, and its intersection with climate justice is going to be different. And so it's going to be a complex process, and that we have to be aware of the fact that, for example, I don't think the people out in Aloha are really too worried about land subsidence and land movements downhill, because there's not much downhill. So I think we have to be concerned or make sure that we realize that these Venn diagrams will have slightly different solutions, and we're going to have to tailor responses sometimes for specific regions, and that's going to be part of our proactive policy.
Thank you. Councilor Nolan?
Thank you, Madam President. I want to tie together your comments about Metro providing a regional framework initially so that the region reacts to that instead of not necessarily following the RTP process, which is more of a list of projects that are then evaluated among themselves. And I also wanted to tie in Councilor Lewis's comments about silos. It is just as important in my mind for this task force to not only frame a process by which the region prioritizes projects with direct measurable outcomes on climate deterioration and climate justice. It's just as important to have a regional response on what gets built and what doesn't get built. So I would encourage that this process include an opportunity for the climate regional table to weigh in on other infrastructure investments under other regional tables.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you so much for everything, and thank you to the council for a good conversation. We look forward to hearing the next steps and seeing what is the result.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Marisa, for shepherding this through.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And I'll turn it over to you for communication.
Okay. A couple updates for you today. Today at 5 is the deadline for our Expo Futures RFP for our consultant services. We've received a ton of interest from across the country in that work, so I'm looking forward to having a strong, healthy pool of applicants to evaluate. Thanks to those in advance who are helping us evaluate those apps. A heads up that our employee engagement survey is going to be going out in the next couple of weeks. This is an effort that we engage in every other year to take the temperature of our workforce and what it's like to work at Metro. We ask a series of questions, including some questions that are asked in surveys nationally, so that we can benchmark ourselves to other places and try to exceed those benchmarks. So you'll be hearing more about that as we go. And finally, tomorrow, our senior leadership team will be meeting in a retreat at the Oregon Zoo for most of the day. So we will, of course, be available to you, but it's the first retreat in person that we've had in many years. So really looking forward to that and hoping to make that a more regular thing. And that's all that I have for you today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Counselors, communications? Nobody's going to talk about Mayor Pete? Secretary now?
That's right.
Councilor Wong.
Great, thank you, Madam President. Couple things for me. Well, first, yesterday we had a great tour of the Oregon Convention Center, and we got to walk around, all the new developments and also see the back end. And it was just, great to see how the convention center operates. So kudos to the staff for putting that together. Last Friday, Secretary Buttigieg came to our region and visited with folks at Albina Vision, I think he went to a project in Washougal and then spent the morning with us out on 82nd Avenue. And highlights from his speech were really that, visions can't come from a grassroots, not from a federal level. So he was really appreciative of hearing kind of the region's plans for a lot of our future, hopefully, transportation investments. And then he really encouraged our region to get our ducks in a row and come up with a unified vision so that the Department of Transportation could fund those in the future. So yeah, overall, a great visit, and we hope the Secretary will come visit us again. And then speaking about 82nd Avenue, our TOD program is set to receive a $5 million state allocation. I was able to work with Representative Confam to put that together, and it's to do land acquisition for future affordable housing along the corridor in Portland and also in unincorporated Clackamas County. The allocation is in the state budget, but still awaiting the governor's signature. And I want to express, my gratitude to the TOD team and also to Annalisa for shepherding that through. We'll be talking about how best to deploy those resources and working with local community partners as well as various agencies to make the most out of it. And we look forward to bringing back future potential acquisitions. That's it for me. Thank you.
That's great. Good news. Councilor Lewis and then Simpson.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I wanted to start by also reflecting on Friday's tour of 82nd Avenue and really thank Congressman Blumenauer and his team not only for including Metro and our transit planning as core to the corridor investments. It's not all about jurisdictional transfer, it's also about our transit project. And for making room on the bus that was laden with elected officials and tons of cameras and press. For community coalition, including those that are leading through our stakeholder process. So really impressed by Friday. I think that Secretary Buttigieg is a genius, and he thinks on his feet faster than anybody I've ever met, and really truly skilled and actually heard us. That was great. I also want to let my colleagues know that when it comes to the Keller project, for those who have been following what the city of Portland is doing, they are invested in a process of looking at a future Keller building. Probably you're familiar with the rehab, refurb, remodel, rebuild on site. In order to move forward in that kind of exploration, they also want to take into consideration potential other sites for a grand theater. And tomorrow, Wednesday, there will be an RFI or an RFP, forget which acronym, released by the city, asking any landowner who owns large parcels in the center core who might be interested in diving deeper on if they would be a potential relocation site. That will be released tomorrow. So not taking away from the work that has gone into Keller redesign, but making sure that we have complete analysis of the futures. So don't be surprised by that news when that's released, again, Wednesday.
Thank you, Councilor. Is there criteria related to the request for land, or is it just open-ended?
It's pretty open-ended in order for people to call back, and then I think they know the square footage and some of the basics that they'll be asking questions about in order to move them forward in the process.
So there's been, I'm sorry, I'm going to drill down too far. Is the city trying to achieve a bigger vision through relocation, or?
They're trying to draw the straw man of what relocation would be possible.
Okay.
If nobody raises their hand and says, I'd be a willing seller, then there is no relocation possibility.
Okay.
And not
It's
having
a
a
start.
relocation possibility changes what you want to do to the building.
So it's a start, and it's in the core.
Yeah, they've got some geographic boundaries and they've got minimum acreage, which is going to be hard with our small blocks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Simpson.
Thank you. I won't be long. I'll be brief. I want to echo Councilor Wong and Councilor Lewis's comments about the trip and dive just a little bit deeper in the breakfast that we had with Secretary Buttigieg. really talking about the albino community and impacts that federal and state and local policies had on the Black community and, forcing them out, but then also where they have ended up in the Rockwood and in the District 1 areas. And so it was really a good time to paint that clear picture of how federal, state, and local investments have impacted communities and forced them into situations that don't work. But also it was an opportunity to talk about reclamation and what that could look like for the two communities. Secretary Buttigieg was, again, brilliant. He's like Councilor Lewis said, I mean, I've never seen a brain computer move that fast from anyone. And so hopefully we can get our ducks in a row as we continue to lead this region because there are federal dollars out there that could support a lot of the things that we need. And I also want to thank our staff, PBOT staff, and Director Irene Marion and Congressman Blumenauer staff for all their coordination that they did for this trip. It was a big one, so thank you.
Thank you. Ditto to all of that. Councilor Gonzalez.
Awesome, thanks. It was great to see all the photos from the Secretary visit, and just awesome that our region and we have so many fantastic leaders locally that are involved in projects that we can just show a really strong face and voice. So I just feel like all kinds of joy with that. On my updates, there are 3 community choice grants for parks and nature. 2 happened last weekend, but there is one more upcoming this Saturday at Centro Cultural in Cornelius that Saturday morning. So I want to encourage folks to have the opportunity to do that. The Parks and Nature team has been doing some West Side project visioning and kind of like a participatory process with community around voting for projects, kind of the first time thing in recent history. So huge kudos there, and we'll continue working to help people get out. For our own knowledge in the late hours of the night, the RTP draft was published for public comment, and you can review all the chapters. You'll be able to see the materials online, and just be aware that that's actively being pushed. There's a landing page where people can provide feedback and comments really on any aspect of it. And as Tom Kloster has reassured me, the planning and transportation team really does review every single bit of testimony and comment to make sure that it lands somewhere within the RTP, so that like really the technical threshold for contributing is we try and make it as low as possible. So just be aware, counselors and our guests and our attendees that are listening in. Lastly, I think it's this Thursday, the Oregon Transportation Commission will be meeting. I'll be providing some testimony on behalf of Metro for the Oregon Transportation Plan as that kind of moves into final adoption, giving the kudos where it's due, really elevating climate equity and safety in ways that are promising, and also encouraging feedback and opportunities for improvement and implementation, which is connecting the dollars to the policy, to the project, and then that feedback loop, which is a constant thing that we've been working on. But I really have to give a lot of credit to the ODOT staff and the consultants that they worked with on this, because they've been really open about those questions and acknowledging that there are opportunities to improve. So now it's just really getting that to the OTC and hoping that they grab it by the reins.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a real quick, since we haven't met for a little bit and we had the holiday in between, a week ago, Friday was the grand opening of Terrace Glen, which is another Metro-supported housing project right near Washington Square. It's a great location. It's a really nice facility. It was a nice hot day for opening. It is also supported with our TOD grants, and there was a lot of people in attendance. It's nice to see some of these things still happening, and happening rather rapidly. Probably the most important thing about this is that this was reviewed as TOD only about 2 years ago, and it's only taken them about 2 years to actually finish the project. Very high speed and something to be commended.
Thank you. I have two quick things. Was invited to a high-speed rail conference in Vancouver. I'm sorry, it was not a high-speed rail. It was a high-speed rail panel at a conference called Commotion, which is the marriage of technology and transportation and the built environment. It is coming out of two conferences that were set up in the States, in LA and Florida. And it turns out, after meeting the person who runs these conferences, he was the Davos conference director for 6 years. And after hearing all of the presenters present for 6 years, he's like, you know, there's something to this built environment thing. Seems like the future is going to be dependent on getting it right there. And I'm like, thank you. So it was an interesting mix of private and public interests, which is great to see things move forward faster. And I'm really interested about the Motivate conference in November, and would encourage us all to think about somehow looking into attending that in LA. The last one is just, it's a heads up for now. I would like to hear from each and every one of you, but maybe not in this setting. I think just giving you a quick update on the Regional Tolling Advisory Committee. The last two meetings, it's been now 2 months since the governor asked for a pause until January of 2026 on tolling in the I-205 corridor. I want to remind you before I move on to what I have to tell you about is that there are two things going on. There's the I-205 projects, right, and that is based on tolling. And then there is the Regional Mobility Pricing Program that is in its environmental assessment phases. And both of those, as far as, don't want to put words in Councilor Lewis's mouth, but in my case, both of them, ODOT took extreme shortcuts to get to a solution and not a whole lot of input onto a lot of things. But the I-205 projects are based on legislatively directed tolling. And I think that that was to advance and accelerate the projects, which was a good cause, a good reason. But now that tolling is delayed, both tolling and the Regional Mobility Pricing Program will start up in basically the same time. There has been a lot of talk about what the tolling project will pay for, but there's been zero talk about what the Regional Mobility Pricing Program will pay for out of the revenue. So at the last meeting, I made it very clear that I think the committee and the state needs scenarios to evaluate whether we actually need the tolling project or not. So they're going to be moving forward on scenarios at my request. One is as is tolling and the Regional Mobility Pricing Program, the revenues from that and what it would pay for. And then moving forward with just the Regional Mobility Pricing Program in place, and what revenue it would raise and what it would pay for a 3-lane, a 2-lane, and a 1-lane option, because that's what Clackamas County has been asking for. So once we have those scenarios, I will have a lot more information to provide you, but right now, it does not make sense to have tolling and Regional Mobility Pricing Program in my head. I don't think we need the tolls. So I will get input from you all on that as we go along, but right now I don't have any information to share on the scenarios. They're being developed and created and evaluated. But it is very clear that tolling and the mobility pricing program politically is going to, I don't think it's doable. So to move forward and actually get the projects and to have a mobility pricing program for the future, it would seem to me like we need to consider this option and then basically push the legislature to amend their proposal, because this is legislatively directed. It was not any of our decision. It was not a JPAC decision. We all said that we would include these things based on that legislative direction, but at this point, it seems like we need to evaluate because those conversations never happened. So that's what I requested. So we'll talk about that when we have more information. But I wanted to give you that heads up. With that, I don't have anything else. Seeing nothing, Councilor Rosenthal, did you have something more to add?
I was going to ask a question, just was the vehicle mile tax part of the discussion, or is this part of the discussions of tolling? No, okay.
No, that would have to be legislatively directed. And I'm sure it will come up during a 2025 potential transportation conversation package. Yeah.
That's all.
We're just working on what the legislature has actually directed at this point. So thank you. It's a good question. All right, seeing no other hands raised and no other needs to run forward with information, we will adjourn. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for July 18th at 10:30 a.m. Thanks, everybody.